them under the suspicion that they might be Mexican. And then when someone goes, nah, fuck that, and like throws a rock or a stick, that's like, this is the most violent incident that has taken place. And a lot of Americans actually do operate on this boundary where they go, yeah, you can't do that. What the fuck do you mean? Yeah, you're going to get shot. It's like, if you have an anti-violence position that is consistent across the board, you should be in utter horror at the systematized version of violence that is unfolding in front of our eyes. When you got a fucking unaccountable military being applied domestically to your neighbors that are getting mass apprehended for a minor crime, only to be deported to an El Salvador slave labor prison colony. Yeah. Like here's a great example of that. That asymmetry.
What are they doing? No! Oh my God.
That was really cool, guys. You guys are super cool for that. Wow.
A lot of Americans actually look at this and go, well, you got what you deserve. There is a bootlicker tendency in the minds of many, many Americans. Okay? I think this is completely and utterly unacceptable. Like, look at that. Look at the cruelty. Look at the enjoyment they seemingly derive from behaving in this fucking violent way. You have to always apply this standard. Is the apprehension worthy of the offense? Is the reaction worthy of the initial offense here? That's an old lady, man. That's an old lady.
No, what the fuck? No, what are they doing?
He immediately, close up, starts peppering paintball rounds at this old lady.
No!
And then goes for the throat and just slams her into the fucking concrete. And look at the modesty presented here. The first thing that she's still thinking about, even when she's going down, is to just hide. Is to make sure that she's not on the ground and you know, you can see her body. That she's not exposed. That's a hero. They slam her into the ground. And then the first thing that they do after they slam her into the ground, when you know she is no longer a threat, she was never a threat to begin with, but she is absolutely not a threat any longer by every metric, they start shooting her. How can we act as though we live in a civilized society when the agents of the state behave like this? How? I don't look at what these guys are doing as anything but the same kind of violence, if not worse, because they have the mandate, the broad mandate of the state to do this sort of thing. So they have a higher power here. They have to exercise restraint here more than the average person does. But I look at this as violence. I see this as what it is, violence. Unfortunately, for many Americans, once someone is wearing the badge or wearing the military gear, they do not see it as such. They don't see it as such. They see someone wearing the badge and they think they can do whatever they want. There has to be, and there is, within the confines of the law, there is a concept called proportionality. Okay? Whether you are the military or whether you are a member of law enforcement in any capacity, or even if you are someone who is adjudicating over a court case, there is a concept of proportionality. Is the incident that demands a response from the police or from a legal authority worthy of this level of violence? Is it proportional? Or is it an escalation? This cannot be seen as anything but a severe escalation. I don't think a lot of Americans understand what it looks like when this system collapses, when people no longer have faith. Americans are very fortunate to have lived in this bountiful empire where no matter how bad things get, there is still like some infrastructure that you can rely on. The notion that like people nominally care about the Constitution and these other institutions like the courts, right? There are certain principles that we care about, that we hold near and dear, okay? And we've taken that for granted. And while all of that is being ripped away from us, we fail to comprehend what it looks like if people do not have any faith in these systems whatsoever. Okay? That's chaos. That's chaos. That's uncontrollable chaos. That is a terrifying prospect. This is why I've always railed against accelerationism, even though it's seemingly out of my hands at this point. And it seems like the liberals were the accelerationists all along with their inability to address the crisis at hand. They have allowed the Republicans to win over and over again and continue to accelerate. When all institutions fail and we have no one to rely on but ourselves, that creates an environment of instability, fear, and chaos. This is what happens when the social fabric rips apart in front of our eyes. When a guy that does that, when a member of law enforcement does that to a person engaging in an act of civil disobedience, and there are no punishments for that person, you teach every single other member of law enforcement that that is appropriate, that no amount of violence that you engage in is going to be punishable. And when they keep doing this over and over again, and no punishments come from these other institutions that are supposed to issue punishments, people lose faith. People lose faith in the systems. People lose faith in the Constitution. People lose faith in those who are technically, in theory, tasked with defending them. Because that's what these guys are supposed to be doing. That's what all of these guys are technically doing, right? They're supposed to be defending us. This is in our best interest, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Do you feel like any action that you saw, whether it be the people that are detained inside of this unmarked van, or the way that they escalated, the way that they shot and brutalized this person engaging in an act of civil disobedience, did any of that feel like it was done for you? Did that feel like, did you feel like you were protected? Not to say I agree with the counter as this level of action deters future action. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It never does. That's the problem. Because as long as these issues are left unaddressed at the legislative agenda, as long as these issues are left unaddressed by those in power, the discontent grows. This actually invites tremendous resistance. Because there is a level of discontent that people will, a level of stress that people will abide by as long as they have some kind of firm commitment that it might not be perfect, but the government still is there to keep things in order. Once you completely lose confidence, born out of behavior exactly like this and the lack of accountability that you see from these institutions that are supposed to be defending your best interests, you lose faith. And when you completely lose faith, there's only two ways out of that. You lose faith and you continue protesting and you continue trying to make the government listen to your demands. And the government can either cave and say, you know what, you were right. After a period of unrest, we have decided that we have to take action and we have decided we're going to go in a different direction. Or they actively increase the suppression. They actively increase the repression, prosecution of political opponents, mass apprehension, the erosion of the First Amendment. And it terrifies me that we're moving in that direction. It terrifies me that the administration is setting up the stage for prosecution of all political dissidents. They will act as though it is people like myself, people like yourselves, organizers, activists, that are the reason why people are out in the streets, and not because they see armed, masked agents of the state in unmarked vans kidnapping people. That's not what's pissing people off. It's actually the commentators that are really signaling that this is wrong. Look, I will assure you that I'll be here for as long as I can, okay, till the very last step. But make no mistake, I'm warning all the liberals and anyone who's apolitical in your lives that we have to be organized, okay? We have to be organized because I don't see this going in a positive direction. Luckily for us, the administration is somewhat responsive still to backlash, but there are certain agenda items that they won't let go of no matter how unpopular it gets, whether it be Israel and our deep loyalty and commitment to continuing Israel's genocide, or whether it be mass apprehensions of people. I guess the only thing that I can hope for is how incompetent they are, because their demands for purity in the form of loyalty in the administrative state has created an environment where the people who are actually in control over these institutions are so unimaginably incompetent that they end up enforcing petty grievances perhaps far too quickly, and that creates a lot of backlash, which forces them to back away. Why are you warning liberals? It was liberals who were all in on Trump's threat to democracy in 2024. Why am I warning liberals? Because they didn't take it seriously back then. Because if they had done so, they would have actually done something about it. And they're still not taking it seriously right now. I know for a fact that there are a lot of people out there who probably think, who are either apolitical and completely oblivious to what's going on, or are liberals and they were like, we voted, we did our job, now it's up to everybody else, fuck them, okay? That don't realize that they too need to be out in the fucking streets. Okay? I know that there are a lot of people who still blame the left, for example, who say, oh, you guys didn't vote. They fantasize about leftist inaction here. They don't look at the situation as the left warning, people like myself warning the Democrats to take action, to counter message against a lot of these broad initiatives that the administration ran on, no matter how racist they got, because they were actually creating an environment of hysteria that they would be the only people who could directly solve this manufactured problem that they created. This is what my position has been from the jump. It's my position when liberals are in power. It's my position when Republicans are in power. It's always been what I have said. And to be fair, there are liberals. There are a lot of liberals, whether it be the No Kings protests or whether it be any other kind of protest that liberals have engaged in. There are so many more people who also see the discontent, who also feel the resentment towards this administration and want their voices to be heard. To be fair, it's probably the most normal thing that the shooter did that week.
He says that there was a handwritten note that was recovered that said, quote, hopefully this will give ICE agents real terror to think, is there a sniper with AP rounds on the roof? The FBI also released a picture.
Yeah. Micah Irvin says, breaking, FBI Director Kash Patel has released the private messages of the Dallas immigrant shooter. Close friend, hey, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have radicalized me to do violence against ICE. I remember you mentioning this at our last Antifa meeting. Will you be committing the act in solidarity with the Democrat Party? I'll be aiming at ICE officers, but I'm cross-eyed, so wish me luck. Sounds good. Also, I'm trans, as you know. Like, that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. The way that the FBI is like, wow, we have found some serious stuff here, guys. It seems that the shooter was a straight ticket Democrat, okay? And also loved the communism that Nancy Pelosi was advancing in America. It seems to me like this narrative might come across as very convenient for all of you, but I guess we have no more questions. There it is. The communist Hakeem Jeffries. This is satire, right? Yes, this is a joke. This person is making a joke about the silliness that the FBI is presenting in terms of like ascribing a motive to the suspect who killed himself.
Of anti-ICE messages written on rounds that were found next to that shooter. Officials say this attack was a result of dangerous anti-ICE rhetoric. Officials say the gunman was firing at that ICE facility from the rooftop of a nearby building. He fired indiscriminately with bullets flying all around inside and outside that building. He also hit a van in the Sally Port that was carrying 3 illegal migrants. Officials say one of them died and the other was taken to the hospital. Sources close to this investigation shared this picture of the shooter's driver's license with me. He is identified as 29-year-old Joshua John. Officials say he shot and killed himself when officers cornered him. The New York Post reports that his mother posted a series of anti-gun rants on Facebook.
By the way, I'm sorry. Now the parents' politics matter? Oh, really? Oh, really? Quite interesting. The parents' politics didn't matter with Tyler Robinson, but now the parents' politics is the most important part. Let me tell you, okay, we really got to figure out what the parents believe. Do not ask me what Tyler Robinson's parents believe. Do not. That is irrelevant. That is irrelevant. And by the way, the parents were mad at the politicians. The mother was mad at the politicians after Uvalde, which was a universal experience for all Texans. That's what the fuck they're talking about here. Okay? They're like, wow, the parents experienced discontent towards their Republican administration after what incident? You might be asking yourself, if you're at least like a little bit skeptical of the fucking narrative that they're designing here on Fox News and on New York Post. Oh, that's right. After fucking Uvalde, which was, again, not an uncommon moment of anger towards all of the politicians that many Texan parents felt were responsible.
Just a few years ago, those rants were aimed at Republican lawmakers, including Senator Ted Cruz, who spoke here at this press conference yesterday.
Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country.
Is saying all Texas not a bit of a broad stroke? Do you not remember the aftermath of Uvalde? Do you think that Republican Texans in the aftermath of Uvalde weren't mad at the cops and also the administration as well? It was a spectacular failure of epic magnitude from all parts of the government, from the inability of the cops to do anything about it, all the way to the way that the politicians in Texas, like the local politicians in Texas, messaged around the issue. It was universal. It was universally felt, the anger and resentment, for different reasons, but there was definitely a lot of fucking frustration. Yeah, 377 cops sat outside the school for 77 minutes, man. What are you talking about? You think fucking Texan parents weren't mad? There were literally parents of Uvalde kids that basically infiltrated the school themselves, took matters in their own fucking hands because they saw that cops weren't doing shit. Are you kidding me? Yeah, that's the one where cops just sat outside playing fucking Candy Crush and shit. And then the politicians try to be like, door control. We need door control. Yeah, they were arresting parents that wanted to get their kids and stuff. Like, it was crazy. It was one of the most insane stories of coming out of Texas. They prosecuted families that were critical of the cops after the incident. Every part of that was a perfect demonstration of how Republican governance works. And it created a lot of anger amongst both the liberals in Texas, but certainly the Republicans and the apoliticals of Texas as well.
The third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop.
And at the same facility, there was a bomb threat in August. And then in July, a police officer was shot in the neck in an ambush-style attack outside of an ICE detention facility here in Alvarado, Texas. But Harris, there has been a lot of questions about what the motive is. And I think
weren't those dudes vets too? The ones that did that? That didn't get a lot of coverage in the media because I think that they were fearful that would invite copycats too. But I'm pretty sure it was a bunch of fucking Marines that did that. Again, remember, I warned about this. I talked about this even before the election, as I brought back historical examples. As Donald Trump was running around talking about Operation WB, okay, won't say the word, it's a slur. I talked about how these kinds of mass deportation initiatives invite a lot of resentment from the local population where you do it. And people who might be previously Republican, people who might have voted for the party in charge to do these sorts of things, once implemented, will have a very different attitude. Okay? Donald Trump was running around celebrating Eisenhower in the aftermath of the Bracero program, doing mass deportations of those of Mexican background, including American citizens of Mexican background, for the record, all the way down to the migrant workers that they had brought into the country, and the people that were hunting down the marshals that were trying to do this deportation policy were the fucking Texan ranchers.
Documents and what the FBI director, Kash Patel, just put out paints a pretty clear picture there.
Brooke, thank you very much for getting us started. I want to bring in now Tom Homan, border czar, and you have been warning us about this as a country for months. You have said this on this very program. If you have just a moment to stand by, I'm going to play you saying what you knew would happen.
I said 2 months ago, Harris, that if this rhetoric didn't stop, there would be bloodshed. And I'm telling you, it's only a matter of time before there's an incident where an ICE agent's going to have to take a life or an ICE agent's going to lose a life. Being compared to Nazis and racists, that it's going to end with a use of force, that either a criminal is going.
I think one of the quickest ways to not be compared to the Nazis is to not do Nazi shit, by the way. like conscientious objectors, demands from within to say like, hey, what we're doing is actually unconscionable and wrong, because it is, right? But instead, they are going to stamp out discontent. That's what they're going for. They're going to keep up the brutal enforcement of mass deportations, and people's resentment is going to continue growing towards these mass deportation initiatives because they are objectively violent. And anyone that actually experiences anger against this kind of thing for watching their neighbors get ripped apart from their families by masked agents of the state that are simply following orders, okay? They're going to be like, that's some Nazi shit. What the fuck are you doing? And then they're going to come and arrest you too for saying that's Nazi shit. Oh.
Want to die or an officer's
Yeah,
going to
by the way, he says, oh, this is only going to lead to ICE officers like murdering someone. It already has, for the record. It has.
die. It's going to end up with a loss of life, and it's not over. I mean,
Says you law, it's very rare to see people call you Nazi, but anybody, including especially the most insane people ever, can go online and call you a Nazi. Says Marxist love. What do you mean? I don't think you are around. I don't think you're around normies at all. Normies don't like this shit, dude. It's very obvious. Also, calling your fucking political opponent a fascist or a Nazi, especially post World War II, is quite literally one of the most common things that people do. I would go so far as to say that normies experience this kind of discontent towards the administration and are more willing to say this is fascist, this is unacceptable, than people calling me a fucking terrorist in the real world as opposed to online. Especially because the fault lines in which people call me a terrorist are on an issue that has swung societal attitudes dramatically in my direction. Can you imagine an average person turning around and being like, oh, you oppose Israel's genocide? You're a terrorist? Especially now in broad daylight in public? Nobody's fucking doing that. That's ridiculous.
rhetoric has to end. So rhetoric needs to be tapped down, or you're going to see more bloodshed. I called it 2 months ago, and unfortunately, I was right.
Once again, the question I have is this. Do you think the average person looks to what the administration is doing with these mass deportations and goes, I thought these were, rapist decapitators that were getting apprehended. I'm only seeing a bunch of dudes that work in the fucking fields and dudes getting packed up at Home Depot for wanting to work a construction job for pennies on the fucking dollar. Where are the serial killers that you guys are apprehending? This is fucked up. I see that a lot more common. What do you think is more common in the normie sphere? People looking at that and going, that seems like some fucking Nazi shit. Or people running around being like, oh, you oppose Israel? You're a terrorist. What do you think is more common? Discontent towards the administration for specifically its mass deportation policies, or discontent towards those who criticize Israel for doing a genocide? Look no further than the polls to realize that the popular support is both against the administration on ICE and also against the administration and its unlimited loyalty demonstrated to Israel as it conducts a genocide.
And then now the new chapter of a detainee being the person who was killed and another detainee, a couple of them wounded in all of this. Your first reaction?
I wish I was wrong, but I've seen this movie before. I've been doing this here since 1984. I got over 4 decades doing this job, and I've seen this movie before. I've never seen it this bad, but the rhetoric is what's causing all this hate, and it convinces that small percentage on the left that hate ICE to take action. When they have a congressman or someone that ran for vice president of the United States comparing ICE to Nazis, that gives some of these nuts and emboldens them to take action. And there's been 3 shootings in Texas alone. There was a gunman that showed up at a Border Patrol facility and started shooting at them. He picked the wrong facility. He picked a SWAT facility, and those officers ended up taking his life. Then there's a shooting just south of Dallas where they attacked an ICE facility and one officer was shot in the neck. Then this latest incident. This is based on hate that's being fueled by the media and members of Congress and governors and mayors. You played on your show. We got to stop. ICE agents are enforcing the law Congress enacted. If you don't like what ICE is doing, then go tell Congress, because they wrote the laws that ICE is obligated and took an oath to enforce. They're making this country safe again. Every day they take a public safety threat or a national security threat off the street, it makes that community safer. All these politicians and mayors and governors should be calling President Trump and thanking them for making their community safe again.
You know, the president has been talking about the high numbers of people that you all are looking at. And this was a processing center, or is, in Dallas. And that's kind of the last step before many of them will be kicked out of the country because they came here illegally.
Again, they can't even speak to the humanity of those who were shot and are critically injured or killed. Because if they do, then all of a sudden it's like, well, you were chaining them. You know what I mean? It's so crazy. It's such a strange environment that we're in, where like this dude ended up shooting and killing a detained migrant. This dude ended up shooting and killing a detained migrant that was like kidnapped by ICE. And because on the one hand, the higher priority here is to justify that mass apprehension, mass detention, mass kidnapping initiative, you can't recognize the humanity of those who were slain. But also on the other hand, you want to really hype up this incident of political violence. And a part of that requires you to talk about the humanity of those who were slain. There's 2 different priorities here. On the one hand, they want to fucking stamp out any sort of political dissent. And therefore, they want to make this like a broad leftist initiative. But on the other hand, because the people that this dude shot and killed were detained people who deserve the violence in the eyes of the administration, right? Maybe not that degree of violence, but even if that degree of violence does take place inevitably when they're in like an El Salvador detention facility or whatnot, it's still justifiable in their eyes because like they came here illegally. What are you talking about? They're clearly obsessed someone was killed. Really? When someone is killed, you turn around and go, they're an illegal alien. We are so sad that this illegal alien that we detained and basically put in chains was murdered. It feels like that's a bit of a conflict there, no?
Those numbers, are they higher than what we thought? Like, where are we in the numbers of people that you are looking for right now?
Well, look, last time I looked, we're at about 600.
I agree with the czar. This one, and well, law. Once the left gains power, the right will be the one shooting for not agreeing with the way since things are handled. Not good for anyone, to be honest. I like that we are just avoiding talking about the current existing system of violence that's taking place. We're fantasizing about hypothetical violence that might come in the aftermath of like left seizing power somehow and then dramatically restructuring American society in this left vision. And then there will be right-wing violence that takes place. The mind of a centrist is incredible to me, okay? Dog, the majority of times it's still the right, whether they're in power or out of power, whether the victim is a right-wing figure or not. The majority of times, it's still the right doing the violence. Not that it matters ultimately. I think like this kind of back and forth on like where this political violence is coming from, I find to be a silly, foolhardy endeavor, because violence is a constant in American politics, both at the systemic level, but also certainly decentralized acts of violence as well. But, even if you were to look at it from the point of ideology, like who is doing the violence, who's doing political acts of violence, who's responsible for a large share of domestic terror, for example, it's overwhelmingly far-right anti-government extremists.
Thousand illegal aliens with a criminal history walking the streets of this nation, mostly because of sanctuary cities. So they are the priority, right? So we're looking for them first. Worse is always first, but in sanctuary cities, if they're going to force us in the community to find a bad guy, and we find them with others, they're coming too. So sanctuary cities are...
It turns out in the absence of like a unified left opposition that is like very well organized and engaging in acts of like labor militancy, for example, or even engaging in acts of violence as like the KPD did during the Nazis' rise to power, it turns out that the right-wing administration in the United States of America will just invent one. They'll invent like a left boogeyman that they must stamp out. And in the absence of any sort of counter message from the left flank party, okay, the liberals, the Democrats, they can just get away with lying. They can get away with building a villainous force, even when all evidence presents the exact opposite reality. But remember, this is, I always repeat this, and it's really important. It's actually a big part of what I talk to the New York Times about, is that right-wingers can get away with violent political rhetoric by simply pointing to the pre-existing systematic forms of discrimination that have been normalized. That's why they don't have to be like, you got to take matters into your own hands and start fighting back or anything like that. No one has to ever say that. Ben Shapiro can run around and simply present the existing form of violence, like whether it be ICE deportations or whether it be police brutality that disproportionately targets black and brown communities and underserved neighborhoods, poor communities, and say, we want more of that. And broader societal attitudes do not automatically read that as someone demanding more violence. During the Jim Crow era, for example, you could look at the unjustifiable practice of segregation, an inherently violent practice that had inherently violent outcomes. And as long as you were not demanding lynchings, or even in some instances you could demand retribution of the sort, it was not seen by broader society as someone demanding more violence. It was seen as someone that was demanding the systems to exist in the exact same way. But if you said, we have to fight back against this, then you could be presented as someone who is actually violent. You're going against the existing law. Why wouldn't you want separate but equal? I mean, equality, it's right there in the name. It's separate but equal, right?
Saying, well, they're arresting non-criminals because you forced us into the neighborhood to find that guy. And when we find them, many times with others, we're not going to turn our back. We're not going to force a law that Congress enacted. We're not going to uphold the oath we took. If you want less collateral arrests, then let us in the damn jail. We're safe for the agent, it's safe for the alien, and it's safe for the community. But they won't do it. Look,
we were always careful with the Nazi comparisons here in Germany for a reason, because there are levels to oppression and right-wing ideology, but the shit going down in the U.S. literally goes by the Nazi handbook. Not only the rhetoric, but the whole ideological skeleton. And this Horst Wessel shit with Kirk proves the point again. ICE literally behaves like the SA. Oh, for sure. And like, remember, just as the Nazis did, they obviously exist within the confines of reason when they're expanding on the permission structure of violence. They're not going to immediately be like, every liberal that says you should be nice to gay people are my op. They're not going to immediately. The Nazis never went around being like, we're evil and we love doing evil, and that's why we want to apprehend all socialists and all communists and all Jews because they're nice. They don't present it. They didn't present it like that. They went through a process of steady dehumanizing and really escalating the tensions, claiming that these guys were actually responsible for so much terror, so much bloodshed, that the communists were an extremist force that was causing so much terror in the hearts and minds of the public, and they must be excised with state violence. Right? They presented it ahead of time, they presented it as like the reasonable position. People have such a funny black and white understanding of like fascism and how it develops and how the out groups are presented and how the in group is presented, because we have like, I guess the hindsight bias here. Like we assume that the Nazis were just like, hello, we are the bad guys. We love doing bad shit. All of our opponents, they are the good guys. They love doing good shit. But because we are the bad guys, we are going to do bad things to them. That's not how that works. That's never how it's worked. There has never been a system of violence that was enforced and defended by those in positions of power while simultaneously recognizing that they're bad. Of course.
Throughout my career, I buried Border Patrol agents. I buried ICE agents. I've handed too many folded flags to spouses and children of those that died in line of duty. For God's sake, stop the rhetoric. Let's sit down and talk. But you can't keep attacking these men and women. They're patriots.
Okay, for God's sake, I'm turning into Tom Homan. For God's sake, stop mass deportations. Stop mass apprehensions. It is unjustifiable. It is evil. It is violent. Please stop it. We say it all the time. Nobody listens. Please stop it. Please. It's just like, oh, why don't we just debate it? It's like, what can we debate? Nobody's listening. It's not like there isn't mass discontent against this sort of stuff. There is. You know what I mean? It's like there are polls conducted on this, okay? This was Trump's most popular policy, okay? And once implemented, very quickly, especially in areas where it was implemented by force, people didn't like it. Even people who voted for Trump didn't like it. Why? Because it was built on a mountain of lies. The notion that like undocumented migrants were responsible for a large share of crimes on U.S. soil was a lie. It was the actual opposite of reality, okay? And the extra silly notion that when these undocumented migrants were doing crimes, that they would not get apprehended and subsequently deported in the previous woke administration was such a fucking laughable lie that I'm shocked that people even entertain that, even for a brief moment. Like, what an insane thing. All the cops, all the ICE agents, all the people, all the judges under the Biden administration were like, oh my God, are you a Guatemalan migrant? Well, we caught you red-handed. You decapitated children, but we simply can't do anything about it. You're free to go and decapitate more children. Like, that's an insane fucking narrative. That is an insane narrative that they designed. And in the absence of no pushback from the left flank, in the absence of no pushback from the Democrats ever on these silly-ass fucking narratives, of course, the administration came to power and was like, there's the serious thing happening. There's the serious thing happening. Guatemalans are mass decapitating children. We have to fucking deport all these serious criminals that were previously left undeported by the woke Brandon administration. Okay. And then people very quickly realized that was not the case. Why are you deporting a gay Venezuelan barber? Why are you deporting a guy who's just working construction, who's a fucking union member? Those guys didn't do shit. I thought this was the violent rapist decapitators that were being deported. Turns out none of these motherfuckers have done that. None of these motherfuckers have done that. So when people realize that that's just a lie, they get resentful. They get angry. They go, oh, okay, well, I was duped. It's a very hard thing for a lot of people to come to terms with, by the way, right? There's this attitude of sunk costs, or there's this cult-like attitude almost where you just cannot come to terms with the fact that you were duped. Nobody wants to feel stupid. Nobody wants to feel silly. Nobody wants to feel like they were made a fool of the administration. So some people do double down on it. But many others, once they actually see the policies of deportation in their neighborhoods, they very quickly grow distaste for said policies. They very quickly realize this wasn't what I thought it was going to look like. And when that happens, they turn around and they say, fuck ICE. I don't want this to happen. This is ridiculous. They experience buyer's remorse. And when they experience buyer's remorse, they go out and they protest. First, they call up their congresspersons. There is no ability to actually make your congresspersons listen to your quite reasonable demands, obviously. There is it seems like we are just unilaterally being controlled by the White House at this point. So much for the separation of powers. It doesn't fucking really exist anymore. Trump can do whatever the fuck he wants, and people just kind of go along with it, right? So then that discontent grows. That anger grows, that resentment grows, and then the protests grow. And then people say, fuck ICE. More and more people start saying, fuck ICE, fuck the administration, fuck Trump. You're behaving like a Nazi. And in that process, under a normal theoretical democratic governance, right, the people in power are supposed to look at that discontent and go, oh shit, we're losing the broad popular mandate that we won. Okay, even though they didn't really win broad popular mandate, obviously. But we're losing even our own fans here. We got to do something about it. We got to change our attitude. But as long as they don't do that, and they just keep focusing on those who are saying fuck ICE, or those who are saying fuck this administration, this is not democracy, as long as they try to silence those people, the discontent will only continue to grow.
Their moms and dads too. And I want to see every one of them go home to their families every night. And I pray for.
It doesn't help that people come into terms with being wrong when liberals go around and scold them and say, see, I was right, stupid, and you deserve what you voted for. That's why I don't do that. That's why I don't do that. I never do that. I don't do that about Israel. I don't do that about anything. Because that's not productive. Okay? That's not a productive way to approach this situation. We need the numbers. You shit on everyone. What do you mean? No. When have I ever shat on someone who has experienced a change of heart? As a matter of fact, I even yelled at liberals in the immediate aftermath of the election that turned around and said, oh, now I'm calling ICE on my neighbors that voted for Trump that have undocumented relatives. I said that was ridiculous. I said that they were playing the role of little fascists. I talked about the hypocrisy. I talked about the violence that they take on and how little they clearly gave a shit about this kind of violence taking place. I know people were being passionate, tensions were high and whatnot. But I've told you over and over again, having a principled stance on these issues and wanting to make change in a society that refuses to change, in systems that refuse to actually to change in the positive direction, you need all the numbers. You need all the numbers you can get. That's why I always try to preach to this audience to be more tolerant of those who in the past have exhibited intolerance, right? It's a big part of my argument. It's a big part of my advocacy. You can be a little bit critical of people's intentions as, attitude shift, especially those with a lot of influence, right? Having said that, however, it's still important, especially when you're talking to regular people in the real world, it's still important to be as accepting of those who have actually changed their minds on these sorts of things, no matter how vicious they might have come across initially. Because we need them. We need them. We need everyone.
For that. And I pray for the safety of those we're looking for. No one needs to die. There's no death sentence here. Let ICE do their job. Let them take. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I wanted to just give some receipts for what you're saying. So there have been 9 notable anti-ICE or anti-CBP attacks, acts of violence during President Trump's second term. And just last week, violent protests, and this is the video after the scroll that I wanted to show. Just last week, violent protests broke out at an Illinois.
Look at this. Look at this. They're like, oh, violent incidents, okay? And some of them are violent. And then others are literally just like attacks by rocks and sticks. That's crazy. Kaya, please. Go, lady. Go, lady. You are requested. Your presence is requested. Good girl. Good girly. Anyway, as I was saying, it's crazy to look at the asymmetry here, right? These are dudes with like high-grade military equipment that are that are going around to fields where people are working and mass apprehending and arresting